Hey friend, welcome back to another episode of Ash to Dusk. My name is Ashley Marina. For anyone who's new here, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I hope that you are taking the opportunity for these Sunday episodes to find a cozy corner in your home. Maybe you need to escape and go sit in your car somewhere with the heat on if you're somewhere cold, but that you're just taking 20 to 30 minutes for yourself where we can connect together and just get your week started off on the right foot. We talk about everything on this podcast. I mean, we've uncovered a lot so far. We just got started in October and have over 6,000 plays. Thank you so, so much. But today's conversation is one that I feel like it's hard because we don't talk enough about it, and we're always afraid that someone might be offended when we have this conversation. So I just want to unpack this layer by layer. And it's really this sense of proving yourself, but at what cost? And really, at what point are you diminishing your value because you are staying silent and you are afraid to speak up and to communicate your worth? So, we're going to talk about that today because I am starting to get a really good read of who you are watching. Um, and surprisingly, there's a lot of men here too. But I know that you're watching this because you aspire to change your life in some way. You want to be unstuck from doing the typical thing over and over and over again. You either want to grow in your career, you want a raise, you want to completely ditch the career and start your own business, or you're just trying to figure out what you love. But I think most importantly, all of us here in this community are looking for financial freedom and time freedom. What do I mean by that? We all want to make a wage that, I'm not trying to be rich millionaires here, okay? We just want to make a wage that is comfortable for us and our family and our lifestyle. And we want to be able to have the time to do the things that we love to do and spend quality time with the people that we love. And so, in order for us to achieve financial freedom and time freedom, it's going to require us to be able to communicate our worth and our value without being apologetic in the process. So, I want to unpack that today. We're going to pull it back like an onion, one layer at a time. And it takes me back to a moment when I was sitting in my car, so excited when I was first offered a job as a food service director. Now, when I got this job, this was back in 2016. If you've heard my introductory episode, or if you haven't, go back because I'm not going to go like super deep into it in this episode. But you know that I had worked my way up from a student worker to a receptionist, and then I became a full time food service director in a school district. And when I was offered that job, you guys, I was so excited because, well, number one, I was going through a divorce. So anything with a pay raise, even if it was going to be $50 at the time, I was so excited for. But also because I knew that I always wanted to be in some sort of a leadership role. I love working with people, I love leading people. And so I was just all around so grateful and super excited for the job. And I remember getting the contract and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to make $37,000. I think it was right around $37,000. It was definitely no more than that, but I think it was somewhere between 32 and 37,000. But I remember getting this contract and I was so excited because it was like $10,000 more than what I was making before. And there was a moment where I remember sitting in the car and I remember thinking like, okay, I have this opportunity, and at the same time, wait a second. Everyone else on the administration team is making close to 100,000, if not over $100,000. That thought crossed my mind. It also crossed my mind that there were secretaries in our school district who were making well over $10,000 than what I was making. Okay. And that, I'm not going to lie, that crossed my mind. Have you ever been in a situation before where you were offered a job, but you knew what someone else was making and you're like, wait a second, but then that kind of quickly passed. You didn't fixate on it because you were just so excited for the job. I don't know about you, but that's how I was. So I was definitely very aware But I was just like, let's go. I will prove myself. I am so excited for this. But I found myself in that year really realizing what it meant to step into a leadership role and having to manage a budget that was $1 million and also having 20 employees on the team and managing HR, just all the stuff that comes with managing people. And I remember thinking like, wow, I do a lot. And what I'm getting paid for doesn't feel like it adds up. It doesn't align. In fact, I qualified for reduced price meals for my kids. So my first year as a food service director, I was also filling out a free and reduced meal application so that I could pay 40 cents for lunch instead of at that time might have been 3 something for lunch. And I remember thinking this doesn't feel right. Okay? And that kind of crossed my mind again. And then I let it go. And I kept doing my job and I'm like, I'm just going to prove myself and I found myself in the office with my treasurer and superintendent to say, "Hey, I need a raise. Like I need to be paid my value." Well, I didn't know how to have that conversation. And back then, I was so my self-worth was so low, especially the time of life that I was going through with my divorce and everything that was happening with like my church and just my belief and all the just everything was in shambles. So I didn't know how to have this conversation. And I remember saying to my treasurer, like, do you know that I qualify for reduced meals and I'm a food service director? And I will tell you this right now, the school district that I worked for, they were amazing, hands down. I will always be so grateful to that district. But, there was just some real hard conversations that needed to happen. And I really was not great at having them, and I didn't know what to say or how to say it. And honestly, when I went to ask for a raise, I was so scared. I thought to myself, they're going to think I'm ungrateful. Do you ever feel like that? Or if I go in there with a list of all the things that we've accomplished as a team, I'm just going to be bragging. Like that feels like I'm bragging. Or wait, is this really a success that I should share? Or is this just like expected? I was second guessing every single thing in my mind when I went into this meeting to ask for a raise. And here's what I found to be true on the other side of that. I showed up and I had said, here's where I'm at. Here's what we've accomplished this year. And I recognize that other food service directors are making a different amount than what I'm making. And can we sit and talk about what it would look like to negotiate my salary? And so I actually had to do this a couple of times throughout my career as a food service director. And it gave me practice for when I became a consultant and had to negotiate contracts. But it was one of those things where it's uncomfortable because you don't want to have to do it. You don't want to have to go ask somebody to give you a raise. You just want to be fairly compensated. But at the end of the day, I want to say this, as much as I am all for like know your value and don't settle, and we're going to talk about that, I want you to also hear me crystal clear. There is no getting around the grind, the hustle, the having to prove yourself a little bit first before you can just call your shots. That is real. I don't think that's ever going to change. And if somebody tells you otherwise, I would really question that. Because if I didn't say yes to that salary and I didn't say yes to taking the job, I may not have gotten the job. And I needed that experience to be where I'm at today. If I didn't have that experience, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. So I want you to remember that. I don't want you to say no to things because you didn't get what you wanted right out of the gate. Okay. I don't want that to happen for you. I don't want you to pass up on something that could be a great opportunity, but you're going to need to practice and start kind of collecting all of your success stories and the transformations that you've been able to get somebody else, like get the organization. Maybe you've cut them cost or you've been able to retain employees or whatever that is for you. You need to start kind of collecting those as you go so that when you go and have the conversation with your boss, you can then say, here's what we've been able to do under my leadership, or here's what I've been able to do since I've been working here and what it has done for the company. so that it helps them realize that. And so anyways, that was great, right? I got my raise, and by the time I left being a food service director, I ended up making $52,000. So I went from 37 to 52,000 within a few years. And yeah, it's still not great, right? Like that's still not great for the job. However, I was able to achieve those raises every time I went and asked for them. And that was just the beginning. Little did I know that was just like a test run because I started Project School Nutrition. And that is a consulting coaching business for school nutrition professionals where we help them, training and menu planning and all these things. And when I first started, I I was so afraid to say a number of what the service would cost. Well, number one, I didn't even really know how much to charge. No one's going to tell you what their prices are, any competitor. That information is just not readily available. And we didn't have AI back then or anything like that. So I was really nervous to give my pricing. And I will tell you that there is a cost to being silent about your worth. There just is. And we'll kind of get into that too in a minute. But I did it. I put my number out there and, I started booking schools and I said yes to everything. I said yes to everything and everyone because I was operating in a scarcity mindset. And again, part of it is you do have to have the grind and the grit and the experience. And we need to say yes to some things before we can start saying no to others. Like, I do think that that's real. It just took me a long time to realize that I needed to start saying no quicker than what I was doing. And so I started saying yes to jobs and projects that I was like, what did I get myself into? Again, totally undersold myself because I didn't know how to communicate the transformations that I have been able to do in schools. I didn't know how to do it unapologetically. I didn't know how to do it without feeling like I was bragging. And I found myself partnering with certain organizations or people that didn't really align with what we were doing. And also, that was costing me more time and money than I was charging for, right? So it took me back to like when I had to communicate my value to the school district. Now I want to share something with you because I think this is super important. And you know that I've been in therapy for 9 years now. And I know some people are like, why do you keep doing therapy? That's something that you should be able to come out of or accomplish. And I love what Carrie Washington said. And she was like, oh, you think I go to therapy just because I need help? No, I do that to train my mind. Like I have a trainer for my body physically. And it's so real. If you're ever in a situation where you are giving advice, you're coaching, you're consulting, it is so important to have somebody else who's also coaching you, that you're receiving coaching advice and wisdom from other people. And so therapy for me is something that I don't really ever plan on giving up. I think that's something that I always will have. And in one of my therapy sessions, we were talking about this years ago. We were talking about how, every time I would put out an agreement, like a contract, and I named my price and I would get pushback, I would take that really personal, like, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me, or I'm not valuable enough. Like I made it personal. And I share that with you because this is the same situation with raises, okay? There is no dollar amount of your worth as a human being. There's just not. There's no amount of money that someone can say your life is worth. Yet we interpret that to a dollar amount for our hourly rate. Think about that. Like, would we think that our life is worth $20 an hour? No. But that's what we associate it as, instead of flipping it and saying, what value do I bring to an organization? That is what we have to look at, the return on investment. And when I got that flipped in my head and I stopped looking at it as a personal thing, like, no, my personal value is way greater than this contract value. They're not saying no to me as a person. They're just saying, no, we can't see the value in this proposal. Okay, that's not a me thing, right? That's just the value of my company. And so I had to really work through that. And I think for you, I want you to prepare yourself when you go and ask for that raise, or you start your business and you give that first proposal to somebody. Remember to not tie it to who you are as a person. It is the value that you give or that you can bring to an organization. That's what's going to be really important. And so, yeah, the first couple of years was a lot of me trying to figure out how to price myself appropriately. And it took a few years to make that happen. And then I realized, oh my gosh, when I charge the appropriate amount, I'm also attracting the right people to partner with because we are aligned in the same values, the same mission. We are in alignment of how important the work is that we do and how it does benefit their program. So once I got that into tune, everything changed because we really started pairing ourselves with the right people. Now, jump forward to the last couple of years. Now, I've been doing the consulting, but I also started keynote speaking. Now, the very first speaking engagement I ever did, I was paid $100 for. I was so excited, you guys. I got a check for $100. And I remember that was actually when I was a director still. So I didn't even start Project School Nutrition yet. I was still a director, was paid $100. And I remember showing that check to my husband, and I'm like, oh my gosh, someone paid me to speak. I thought I was going to be doing it for free, to be honest, but they handed me an envelope and they paid me $100. Some of you were interns for me at that seminar that I spoke at, and you know what I'm talking about, but that was my first paid thing. Then, when I actually started putting my name out there as a keynote speaker, I really didn't know what to charge. I kind of knew what other people were based off of the fact that I was a part of event planning for the School Nutrition Association for Ohio. So I had been a part of many planning sessions for our conferences, and I knew that people were charging, about 5,000-ish dollars. This was even a few years ago. And I was just like, okay, I'm going to charge 3,500. Let's just say that. It was like 3,500 bucks. And I remember being so afraid to say $3,500 because I'm like, that's a lot of money for me to go speak for an hour. Oh my gosh, who's ever going to pay that? And what do I possibly know that I couldn't give that kind of knowledge, right? Like that was what was going through my head. And I quickly booked a lot of speaking engagements my first year. I think I did in total, my first year was about 17. And I was like, oh, this is great. But here's what I learned. Okay. When we see things from the outside, we might have a narrative about what the reality is, and it's not true. So let me rewind. Remember, I just said that I was a part of planning conferences for our state association. Well, I would see how much a speaker would charge, and I would be like, wow, $5,000, like that's a lot of money, right? But what we don't see is the hours of preparation that goes into that keynote, the time away from your family when you're there. Oftentimes it's overnight. The cost of travel. I cannot believe how much travel costs nowadays to get on an airplane, to rent a car, to go to the hotel, all the things. We don't see that. Any materials that might need to be had, software programs that you might need to use to manage your contracts, your putting together your keynotes, the refinements of the keynotes, and then also the energy it takes to give a really good keynote. If you give a really good keynote, you are giving everything. You're putting it all on the line every single time you go out on that stage. And that is exhausting and draining. That 1 hour on stage or those few hours in a workshop will drain me very differently than something else. Now, it's also one of the most fulfilling things that I do. However, it takes time to recover. And when you're doing it back to back to back, people don't see that. And it's hard to assign a rate to that, right? So I had to start increasing my fee, and I did. And when I first did it, I was scared. I was like, "Oh my gosh, here I go. I'm going to go from 3,500 up to this amount." And again, I started questioning myself, and here's what I learned. Two things. There are people who will see the value, will align with you, and they will do it. And then there will be others that don't. And that is okay. Or that it doesn't fit their budget. That's okay, right? It's not for me to own. It's just I know that when I go and give a keynote, I know the impact I'm going to make. I know the value that that audience is going to have. And I'm not going to waver on my fee anymore. And I found myself in situations where I was wavering, okay? When I had adjusted my fee, they would say, "Well, can you also do a breakout session? Or could you add more time to your speaking engagement? Or we don't have that in the budget, but we could pay you this." And I was operating in a scarcity mindset again. And I would say yes to those opportunities because I'm like, oh my gosh, I have payroll. I need to pay myself. I'm not on a salary anymore. And I had an experience where I was negotiated down quite a bit from my speaking fee. And I did it. I said yes because, again, it was scarcity mindset. And I get to the event in a different state, by the way, from my own state. So I had to get there, spend the night, all the things. And I find out who the other keynote speaker is. And that keynote speaker charges a minimum of $10,000. Yeah. I was negotiated down to less than a quarter of what they paid him. And that to me, it was really hard. It was hard because I knew I had to show up and I had to give it my all, but I just didn't feel appreciated or valued at all. And the thing was, is we both were giving keynotes. So it didn't matter if it was an opening, a closing, or anything. Like, they're equally important. And that was eye-opening to me. So that was like a first experience with that. And it stung for a moment. And then I was like, okay, that's all right. Maybe there's just something I don't know. And I kept going. And then I found myself in a couple of other situations where we don't have the budget. And maybe they were friends, or maybe I had already been a part of that organization and I wanted to give back, or whatever it might be. And then you do it. And then guess what happens? Then suddenly other people are like, well, wait, you did it for them. And can you do it for me? And I found myself having to share and communicate my worth in a way that was so uncomfortable because I'm like, wait a second, I'm already a couple years into this. I shouldn't have to be like, I've already proven myself. I know that I am a really good speaker. I know I can connect with people, and I know that a transformation will happen on the other side of my keynote. But here I am going back drastically under what I was charging in the first place, right? And so I just had to completely say, I'm no longer doing speaking engagements where I can't charge my fee for. And that was so uncomfortable for me. I am a yes person. I'm a people pleaser at heart. I don't like to say no. I'm a giver. I love to help people. If you know me in person, you really know that. So it has been really, really hard over the last year to start saying no to opportunities because it just doesn't align or fit with where I'm at right now. And budget's a real thing. So like having a budget and being able to afford to bring in a keynote speaker, that's a big deal. And so I recognize that not everyone has that budget, but I really have come to realize that there is a silent cost to not being able to communicate your value to other people and your worth to that organization. Not you personally, like not your personal worth, but the value of the information that you have to give to somebody. And it has taken me a while. I actually use AI now. Like I'll prompt AI to ask me questions and I kind of go back and forth with it to help me articulate, like, here are the things I've been able to do. I've been able to help school districts get back into the black and out of the red. I've been able to help people go from being a frontline employee to a manager to a full-time food service director. Like, I've been able to do these things, but I was always afraid to say it because I was so afraid that people would think she's bragging or boasting about it. And I want to remind you of this. if you keep negotiating your value, you you're never going to be paid for what it's worth. Not everyone can see what it takes to do the work that you're doing. That's just real, especially if you're really good at it. If you're really good at your job, then most people don't see all of the struggles and all of the little nuances because you make it look so easy. And that's when you know you're doing a really good job. So I don't want you negotiating your value anymore to any company, whether you are an employee, you're a contractor, you own your own business. It's time to stop negotiating that. You know your value, and you need to know what is a reasonable amount to charge or what's a reasonable pay raise to ask for. And you do that by market research, kind of get an idea of what's happening in your industry, and then go in and lay it out. Now, for me, it's more so just being able to make sure that my website and any like promotional materials, anything really clearly communicates what the value is to them. But I'm no longer negotiating that anymore because it just doesn't align with where I'm at in my career. And it's unfortunate for us women. I'm going to be really blunt here because I think that this is so true still to this day. Us women have to overly prove ourselves more than men have to. And men, I know you're watching this, over almost half of you watch this podcast out of my entire audience. So I don't want you to hear this or take this the wrong way. It is just a reality. I work with women all the time. I help women negotiate their salaries in their positions. I have had to do it for myself. I was listening to a podcast the other day and they had on a speaker. The guest host was somebody who's a professional speaker. And she was talking about how being a woman in public speaking, you're a minority. And even so more now than ever before. Like we've always been a minority in the speaking arena, but more women keep falling off. And she was talking about how she finally started charging $8,500. Like she was just so excited. She felt like she arrived, locked in her keynote, like so impactful. She's like, I've got this. And she was hired and very excited. When she was done giving her keynote and she got off the stage, now I cannot remember her name, so I'm so sorry for this, but it was an Amy Porterfield episode. And she said she got off the stage and the person who was in charge, one of the people in charge of helping plan this conference felt so guilty. Like she just felt so bad that she went up to this speaker and she said to her, I need you to know something. We paid you $8,500 for your keynote, but that man who's on stage right now, we just paid him $50,000 for his keynote. And that was something that solidified all of my self-doubt about negotiating my worth anymore and my value when it comes to any contract that I sign, any speaking engagement I sign, like anything. I'm done doing that because I now have proven success over and over and over again. But what holds us back is nobody else. It's just us. We're the ones that hold ourselves back because we're so afraid what other people think. We're afraid they're going to say no. And if they say no, then that means we lost income, which means, oh my gosh, can I pay the bills? Right? It's a scarcity mindset. But I have learned time and time again now that the doors and the opportunities will open when they are supposed to. And when they do, it will feel so easy to step right through. Anything that you meet that feels resistance probably is not where you should go. Now, when I say resistance, I don't mean like hard work and grit. I mean like if it just feels hard from the beginning, like it doesn't feel like it's just naturally flowing, there isn't something in alignment. And that's okay. It's going to be best for both parties if you don't enter into an agreement. So that's really what I wanted to talk about today. I just wanted to remind you that there is a silent cost to negotiating your value, and it really starts with identifying what your value is. So, the one thing you can do this week is start sitting down and brain dumping, writing it down. You can use AI like ChatGPT, and I want you to start asking yourself, what have I accomplished over my career? What are transformations that have happened? What have other people benefited from because of my work? And start writing all of that down. And there's nothing too small. There might be things that you think like, that's not really a big deal. It is a big deal. So write it all down and start formulating what it is that you can bring to the table for your organization. And we'll probably do another episode on this so that it's more like a step by step. I just wanted to share my thoughts on this because I know for some of you, you're going into contract renewal season with your company. You are thinking about, trying a new job. You want to start your own business. But this is the reality of it. You're going to have to say yes to things you might not want to say yes to at first to gain the experience, but you need to quickly get away from saying yes to everything to turning it into I'm happy to do this, but here is what I charge, or here is the raise that I need to have in order to stay here. It does take some time, but I promise you it is worth it, and you will attract the right people and the right work once you're able to communicate your value. All right, my friend, thank you so much for being here today. If you haven't had a chance already, please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. It really helps get this out to anyone out there who really needs this message. And it just helps support people like me who are trying to live out our dream. So thank you so much for being here. And until next time, keep your light burning from ash to dusk.